It all started with a phone call on a regular Tuesday afternoon. I was hunched over my desk at work, trying to finish a report when my phone lit up with my mom's picture. I almost didn't answer. Our conversations lately had been strained at best, but something made me pick up. "Hey, sweetie." Her voice carried that unnaturally cheerful tone she only used when she wanted something. "How's my favorite daughter doing?" "I'm her only daughter." "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with work." "What's up?" "Well, we're all going out to dinner tonight, Gardenia, that new place downtown. You know, the one with the rooftop view? Everyone's coming. Dad, Mike, Jason, even your cousin Rachel is in town. It wouldn't be the same without you." Gardenia. Even I knew that place was ridiculously expensive. My parents had never suggested anywhere that fancy before. Usually, our family gatherings happened at chain restaurants with 2-for-1 coupons or potlucks where I'd inevitably be asked to bring the main dish. Tonight? "It's kind of last minute," I said, checking my calendar, even though I knew it was empty. My social life had evaporated months ago when I took on extra shifts to help pay for Mom's medical bills after her insurance denied coverage. "Oh, come on, Emily. When's the last time we all got together? Please?" For me, the sweetness in her voice was almost cloying. I should have said no. Deep down, some part of me knew this wasn't just a spontaneous family dinner. But another part, the part that still desperately wanted to believe my family could change, whispered that maybe this was their way of thanking me for everything I'd done lately. The loans to my brother Mike for his failed business venture. The security deposit for Jason's new apartment after his divorce. Dad's car repairs. "Fine. What time?" 7:30. "Dress nice." She hung up before I could change my mind. I spent the rest of the afternoon distracted, wondering what to wear and if this dinner meant what I hoped it did. Was it recognition? Appreciation? Maybe they'd pooled money to pay me back some of what I'd lent them over the years. By 6 o'clock, I was standing in front of my closet, pulling out the only dress I owned that could pass for fancy dinner appropriate, a navy blue wrap dress I'd bought 3 years ago for a company party. I curled my hair, applied makeup carefully, even put on the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. When had I last dressed up for anything? The restaurant was even more intimidating than I'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and waiters in crisp white shirts glided between tables with practiced precision. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, while floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city lights twinkling below. I spotted my family immediately. They were already seated at a large round table near the windows, laughing and sipping from wine glasses. My dad, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed back, gesturing animatedly. Mike and Jason, their resemblance to each other stronger than their resemblance to me, rolling their eyes at something Dad said. My cousin Rachel, whom I hadn't seen in at least 2 years, her blonde hair cut into a stylish bob. And Mom, watching them all with a satisfied smile. They didn't notice me until I was standing right beside the table. "Oh, there she is," Mom said, as if I was late, though my watch clearly read 7:25. Sit. She patted the empty chair between her and Jason. "You look different," Jason said, eyeing me up and down. Almost like a real adult. "Good to see you too," I muttered, sliding into my seat. Dad looked up from his menu long enough to nod at me. "Order whatever you want, kiddo. It's a special night." He returned to studying the wine list with unusual intensity. "What's the occasion?" I asked, looking around the table. "Someone get a promotion? Win the lottery?" Rachel laughed, a little too loudly. "Does there have to be an occasion for family to get together?" Yes, in our family, there absolutely did. But I didn't say that. A waiter appeared, introducing himself as Marcus before launching into a detailed description of the evening's specials. I half-listened while opening my menu, then nearly choked when I saw the prices. Appetizers started at $30. Main courses were easily triple that. "The seafood tower looks amazing," Mom said, pointing at an item that cost more than my monthly utility bill. "And we should get a few bottles of that Cabernet you love, honey." She looked at Dad, who nodded enthusiastically. "And oysters to start," Mike added. "The Kumamoto ones." One by one, They called out their orders. Lobster thermidor, Wagyu steaks, truffle risotto, caviar en brioche, each dish more extravagant than the last. The waiter's pen moved swiftly across his notepad, his eyebrows rising slightly at the growing list. When it was my turn, I ordered the least expensive item I could find, a pasta dish that still cost $80. That's all you're getting? Mom frowned. You should try the halibut. Marcus says it's their signature dish. The pasta sounds good, I insisted, handing back my menu. As Marcus walked away, an uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I fidgeted with my napkin, wondering what I was doing here. Then Dad cleared his throat. So, how's work? He asked, in that vague way parents do when they don't actually know what their children do for a living. Fine, I said. Busy. Making good money, I hope. He laughed too loudly. Mom kicked him under the table. I saw her foot connect with his shin. I'm getting by, I said carefully. The truth was, I was barely making ends meet after helping everyone at this table. But they didn't need to know that. The conversation mercifully shifted to Rachel's recent trip to Europe, then to Mike's kids, then to local politics. I relaxed slightly, sipping the expensive wine that flowed freely. Maybe I had been paranoid. Maybe this really was just a family dinner, albeit an unusually lavish one. The food arrived, plate after plate of artfully arranged delicacies. Everyone oohed and awed, taking photos for social media before digging in. It was delicious, I had to admit. In another context, I might have enjoyed it. But as I watched them eat and drink with abandon, that uneasy feeling returned. There was something performative about their enthusiasm, their insistence that I try everything, their dismissal when I mentioned the cost. Don't worry about it, Dad said, waving his hand dismissively when I commented on the price of the wine. Tonight's special. But he still hadn't said why. By the time Marcus cleared our dinner plates, I'd almost convinced myself this was nothing more than an extravagant family reunion. The tension in my shoulders had eased, helped along by 2 glasses of that ridiculously expensive Cabernet. Dad was telling one of his old fishing stories that we'd all heard a dozen times, but tonight I found myself smiling at the familiar rhythm of his words. And then the fish, I swear it must have been 3 feet long, just looked me in the eye before it snapped my line and disappeared. Dad slapped the table for emphasis and everyone laughed obligingly. Should we get dessert? Mom asked, already signaling to Marcus before anyone could answer. Absolutely, Mike said, patting his stomach. I've heard their chocolate soufflé is legendary. Let's get one of everything, Jason suggested, a mischievous glint in his eye. Emily won't mind, will you, sis? Something in his tone made me pause mid-sip. What do you mean? He exchanged a look with Mike that I couldn't quite decipher. Nothing. Just that you've been so generous lately. Marcus returned with dessert menus, but no one bothered looking at them. Instead, Mom ordered with the confidence of someone who'd memorized the options beforehand. We'll have the chocolate soufflé, the creme brulee trio, the deconstructed tiramisu, and that seasonal fruit thing with the gold leaf. And a round of those fancy cognacs, Dad added, winking at no one in particular. I stared into my wine glass, doing mental calculations. The bill was already astronomical. For elaborate desserts and premium cognac would add hundreds more. But they all seemed so happy, so relaxed. I told myself it was worth it to see my family enjoy themselves, even if I'd be eating ramen for a month to compensate. The desserts arrived on elegant slate plates, each more elaborate than the last. The soufflé rose impossibly high, dusted with powdered sugar that sparkled under the restaurant's soft lighting. The creme brulee trio, vanilla, espresso, and lavender, came with their own mini blowtorch so we could caramelize the tops ourselves. The tiramisu wasn't even recognizable as tiramisu. It had been deconstructed into delicate layers served in a glass that resembled a modernist sculpture. And the fruit thing was indeed topped with a paper-thin sheet of edible gold. As if on cue, everyone pulled out their phones to document the spectacle. Rachel positioned her cognac glass next to the soufflé for the perfect Instagram shot. This is going to get so many likes, she murmured, adjusting the angle. The cognac burned going down, but not as much as the realization that was slowly dawning on me. I watched them all dive into the desserts with theatrical moans of pleasure, passing plates around, demanding that I try each one. "Isn't this amazing?" Mom asked, her eyes wide with delight as she savored a spoonful of the lavender creme brulee. "We should do this more often." "Absolutely," Mike agreed. Then, with a sideways glance at me, he added, "As long as Emily's willing to foot the bill." The table went silent. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. "What?" I asked, hoping I'd misheard. Mike looked around at the others, confusion flashing across his face. "What?" I thought, "Isn't that why we're here?" "I mean, that's what Mom said when she invited me." Mom's face flushed crimson. "Michael, I did not say that. I simply mentioned that Emily's been doing well at work and wanted to treat us to a nice dinner." She turned to me, her smile strained. "Isn't that right, sweetie?" The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't a thank you dinner. It wasn't a spontaneous family reunion. It was a calculated move to get me to pay for their extravagance. "That's not," I never said, I sputtered, but Jason cut me off. "Oh, come on," he scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Don't act all surprised now. You've been bankrolling this family for years. What's one more dinner?" "Jason," Mom hissed, but the damage was done. Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. "What your brother means is, we appreciate everything you do for us. And we figured, since you're the only one with a stable job right now." "A stable job?" I repeated incredulously. "I'm an assistant editor at a publishing house. I make $42,000 a year. After taxes and rent, I can barely, but you don't have kids," Mike interrupted. "Or alimony payments. Or a mortgage. Your expenses are nothing compared to ours." Rachel, who had been silently watching this unfold, suddenly raised her glass. "Well, I say we make a toast. To Emily, our beloved wallet." It was meant as a joke. I could tell by the way she giggled afterward, expecting everyone to laugh along. And they did. Dad's hearty chuckle. Mom's nervous titter. Mike's full-bellied guffaw. Jason snorted so hard he almost spilled his cognac. "To the wallet," Jason echoed, raising his glass higher. "May she never run dry." They clinked glasses, still laughing, while I sat frozen in my chair, my face burning with humiliation. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away, replaced by a dull roaring in my ears. I looked from face to face, these people who shared my blood, who I'd sacrificed so much for, and saw them clearly for perhaps the first time. "You know, I covered Mom's medical bills last year," I said quietly. They didn't hear me at first, still caught up in their joke. I said, "I paid $12,000 for Mom's surgery last year." My voice was stronger now, cutting through their laughter. "That's why I had to get a roommate. That's why I work overtime every weekend." The smiles faded. Mom looked down at her plate. "And Jason, that loan for your security deposit? The one you promised to pay back in 3 months? It's been over a year." "That was my vacation fund." Jason had the decency to look embarrassed. "I've been meaning to, and Mike, how's that business going? The one I invested $5,000 in?" "Oh wait, it failed, and you never mentioned it again." My hands were shaking, but my voice remained steady. "Dad, should we talk about the car repairs? Or the time I bailed you out when you lost all that money gambling?" Dad's face darkened. "Now wait just a minute. That's not fair. We're family. We help each other." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "You don't help each other. You help yourselves. To my money." The table fell into uncomfortable silence. Rachel looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears, whether from genuine remorse or manipulation, I couldn't tell anymore. "Honey, we didn't mean," Mom began, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "Didn't mean what? To use me? To take advantage of me? To laugh at me behind my back while spending money I don't even have?" "It was just a joke," Jason muttered. "Right. A joke." I laughed, but it came out hollow. Except jokes are supposed to be funny. Mike's eyes exasperated. "You're overreacting. This is what families do. They help each other out. When I get back on my feet, I'll return the favor." But I could see it in his eyes. There was no intention of ever paying me back. In his mind, and probably in all of their minds, I owed them somehow. Because I was single. Because I had no children. Because I'd managed to find steady employment. My success, modest as it was, had become my punishment. "Let's just enjoy the rest of the evening," Mom pleaded, forcing a smile. "The desserts are getting cold." Cold, like the realization spreading through my chest. Cold, like the calculated way they'd planned this dinner. Cold, like the years stretching ahead of me if I continued down this path. I looked at the elaborate desserts melting on their plates, at the half-empty cognac glasses that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, at these people who had taken and taken without ever considering what it cost me. Not just financially, but emotionally. The constant stress, the sleepless nights, the abandoned dreams. And in that moment, something inside me, some last thread of familial obligation, perhaps, simply snapped. My hands trembled beneath the table as I counted backward from 10, trying to control my breathing. The conversation had awkwardly shifted to Jason's son's baseball team, everyone pretending the past 5 minutes hadn't happened. But the damage was done. The truth, once spoken aloud, couldn't be stuffed back into the box of politeness we'd all been operating from. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to use the restroom." No one seemed particularly concerned about my departure. Dad nodded absently. Mom was busy scraping the last bits of soufflé from her plate. Mike and Jason had already moved on to debating some recent sports scandal. Only Rachel met my eyes, and I thought I detected a flicker of sympathy there, but she quickly looked away. I grabbed my purse, a worn leather bag I'd bought secondhand, and pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound jarring against the muted piano music playing overhead. For a moment I stood there, wondering if anyone would notice the turmoil written across my face. They didn't. Of course they didn't. The walk to the bathroom felt like traversing a foreign landscape. I moved on autopilot, weaving between tables where other families, couples, and friends dined together. Were they genuine connections? I wondered. Or were there others like me, playing the role of the reliable one, the responsible one, the walking ATM? The bathroom at Gardenia was as opulent as the rest of the restaurant. Marble sinks with gold fixtures. Plush hand towels instead of paper. A velvet settee in the corner where tired diners could rest. I caught my reflection in the mirror, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with unshed tears. I hardly recognized myself. When had I become this person? When had I allowed my own needs to become so secondary to everyone else's? I splashed cold water on my face, careful not to smudge my makeup. Old habits die hard. Even in crisis, I didn't want to look a mess. As I patted my skin dry with one of those ridiculously soft towels, my phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Mom. "Hurry back. They're bringing the check soon." Of course. That's what they were waiting for. That's why they'd even noticed I was gone. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then, instead of heading back to the dining room, I leaned against the sink and really thought about what awaited me. I'd return to the table. The check would arrive, probably well over $1,000. Everyone would look at me expectantly. I'd hand over my credit card, already close to its limit after helping Dad with his car repairs last month. They'd thank me perfunctorily. We'd leave. And in a few weeks, when another crisis inevitably arose, they'd call me again. It was a cycle I'd been trapped in for years, ever since I got my first steady job after college. A cycle that had left me drained, financially and emotionally. A cycle I suddenly knew I couldn't endure for one more minute. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. I took a deep breath, dropped my phone back into my purse, and walked out of the bathroom. But instead of turning right, toward the dining room, I turned left. Toward the exit sign that glowed red in the distance. My heart hammered in my chest, and I half expected someone to stop me, a waiter, the maitre d', or even one of my family members who'd come looking for me. But no one did. The restaurant's entryway was busy with people waiting for tables, checking coats, greeting friends. I moved through them like a ghost, my mind racing with doubts. Was I really going to do this? Walk out on my family? Leave them with a bill they couldn't pay? What kind of person did that make me? I paused at the front door, hand on the brass handle. Through the glass, I could see the street outside, busy with traffic, pedestrians hurrying past, the city alive with possibility. Behind me lay obligation, resentment, a future of being used. Ahead lay, what? Uncertainty, solitude, but also, perhaps, freedom. Miss? Is everything all right? It was the hostess, a young woman with concerned eyes. Do you need me to call someone for you? No, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I'm fine. Just needed some air. Before she could respond, I pushed open the door and stepped outside. The night air was cool against my skin after the warmth of the restaurant, carrying with it the scent of rain and possibility. I stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling something unfamiliar expand in my chest. It wasn't exactly happiness, more like the absence of a weight I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. I walked to the corner, then paused, looking back at the restaurant's elegant facade. Through the windows, I could see diners laughing, talking, raising glasses and toast. Somewhere in there, my family was probably wondering what was taking me so long. Soon, they'd realize I wasn't coming back. A pang of guilt stabbed through me. What kind of daughter, what kind of sister, abandons her family in a restaurant? The Emily I'd always been reliable, responsible, self-sacrificing, would never do such a thing. But maybe it was time to be someone else. Someone who valued herself enough to set boundaries. Someone who understood that love shouldn't come with a price tag. I squared my shoulders and kept walking, my heels clicking rhythmically against the pavement. 1 block. 2. With each step, I felt simultaneously more terrified and more certain. I had no plan, no destination in mind. Just the fierce determination to break a pattern that had been slowly destroying me. My phone started buzzing continuously in my purse. I didn't need to look to know it was them, probably wondering where the hell I was. The check must have arrived. I imagined their confusion turning to understanding, then to anger. Dad's face reddening. Mom's embarrassed apologies to the server. Mike and Jason swearing under their breath. Rachel, perhaps, secretly impressed. I should have felt worse about it. I should have been consumed by remorse. But all I felt was a strange, bubbling lightness. I laughed out loud, startling a couple walking nearby. They gave me a wide berth, probably thinking I was drunk or unstable. Maybe I was a little of both in that moment. 3 blocks from the restaurant, I finally pulled out my phone. The screen was flooded with notifications. 5 missed calls from Mom. 3 from Dad. Texts piling up, their preview snippets growing increasingly frantic, then angry. Where are you? The bill came. $1,562. Come back right now. Are you serious right now? If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny. Your father is livid. Get back here. I scrolled through them all, my heartbeat surprisingly steady. Then I typed out a simple message. I'm not coming back. I'm not your wallet. Find another way to pay. I hesitated before hitting send, my thumb hovering over the screen. This was the point of no return. If I sent this, there would be no mending this rift anytime soon. I would be the villain in their story, the selfish daughter who abandoned her family when they needed her. But hadn't I been the hero for too long? The reliable one who sacrificed everything while they took and took? When was the last time any of them had considered what I needed? I hit send. Then I turned off my phone completely. The silence that followed was both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in years, no one could reach me. No one could make demands. No one could make me feel small. I was alone on a city street on a Tuesday night, with no plan and no safety net, and I was finally free. I kept walking, past brightly lit shops and restaurants, past couples holding hands, past business people hurrying home after late meetings. The city thrummed with life around me, indifferent to my personal drama, my small act of rebellion. There was comfort in that indifference, in being just another anonymous figure moving through the night. Eventually, I found myself in a small park, the kind tucked between high-rises that most people walk past without noticing. A few metal benches surrounded a modest fountain that trickled quietly in the darkness. I sat down, my feet aching from walking in heels, and watched the water shimmer under the park's sparse lighting. What now? I had nowhere to go but my apartment, and I wasn't ready to face those familiar walls, that space where I'd receive their inevitable calls and messages once they figured out how to pay the bill and leave the restaurant. I needed time to think, to plan, to decide who I wanted to be now that I'd shed the role they'd assigned me. As I sat there, something unexpected happened. Instead of regret or fear, I felt a surge of possibilities opening before me. Without the constant drain on my finances, maybe I could save enough for that writing workshop I'd always wanted to attend. Or take that trip to Portugal I'd been dreaming about since college. Or simply build an emergency fund so I wouldn't panic every time an unexpected bill arrived. A light rain began to fall, fat drops that darkened the pavement in irregular patterns. I didn't move, letting the cool moisture settle on my skin and my hair. It felt purifying somehow, washing away years of resentment and obligation. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Angry calls, accusations, perhaps even a permanent fracture in my family relationships. But tonight belonged to me. To the woman who finally said, enough, who walked away from a table where she was valued only for what she could provide, not for who she was. I closed my eyes, tilted my face up to the rain, and smiled. The rain began to fall harder, soaking through my thin dress. I should have been miserable, wet, cold, alone on a park bench on a Tuesday night. But the discomfort of my physical state couldn't touch the strange euphoria flowing through me. For the first time in years, I had chosen myself. Eventually, the reality of my situation pushed through my emotional high. I was sitting in the rain in a designer district I couldn't afford, wearing a dress that was now probably ruined, with nowhere to go but home. My apartment was at least 30 blocks away, too far to walk in these heels, especially in this weather. I turned my phone back on, deliberately ignoring the flood of notifications that immediately lit up the screen, and called a Lyft. The driver, a middle-aged man named Khalid with kind eyes and a gentle voice, took one look at my rain-soaked appearance and cranked up the heat. "Rough night?" he asked, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. I laughed, the sound slightly hysterical even to my own ears. "You could say that. I just walked out on a family dinner where they expected me to foot a $1,500 bill." Instead of the judgment I half expected, Khalid nodded thoughtfully. "Family. They can be the best thing in your life or the worst thing. Sometimes both at the same time." "That's exactly it," I said, surprised by his insight. "Do you have family like that?" "My brother," he sighed. "For years, he'd call whenever he needed money. Never to check on me, never to see how I was doing. Just Khalid, I need." One day, I stopped answering. Hardest thing I ever did. "Did he ever change?" I asked, leaning forward, suddenly desperate to know if there was hope on the other side of what I'd just done. Khalid's eyes crinkled at the corners. Eventually. 6 months of silence. Then he showed up at my door, not asking for anything. Just to talk. Now we have dinner every Sunday. He even paid me back some of what he borrowed. I sat back, considering this. 6 months of silence. Could I endure that? The thought of cutting off my family for half a year made my stomach clench. But the alternative, going back to the way things were, felt impossible now that I'd taken this step. "Your family," Khalid said as we neared my neighborhood, "they love you." "I think so," I said, though the events of the evening had cast doubt on even that basic assumption. "In their way. Then give them chance to miss you. To see what life is like without you there to solve all problems. Sometimes people don't know what they have until it's gone." When we reached my apartment building, a nondescript 6-story walk-up in a neighborhood that was neither trendy nor dangerous, just affordable, I thanked Khalid for more than just the ride. His words had given me something I desperately needed, a framework for what came next. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning, dishes in the sink, bed unmade, laundry piled in the corner waiting to be washed. It was small but mine, a 1-bedroom I'd managed to hold onto despite the financial drain my family had become. I kicked off my soaked heels, peeled off my wet dress, and stood under a hot shower until my skin turned pink and my mind quieted. Wrapped in my oldest, softest robe, I finally gathered the courage to look at my phone. 27 missed calls. 43 text messages. 3 voicemails. I scrolled through the texts first. "Mom, Where are you? Jason. WTF Emily, Dad. Young lady, you get back here right now. Mike, I can't believe you did this. Dad had to put it on his credit card. Mom, how could you embarrass us like this? Rachel, that was intense. You okay? I paused at Rachel's message, surprised by her concern. Maybe there was one family member who saw me as more than a financial resource. I set that thought aside for later and continued scrolling. The messages evolved from shock to anger to bargaining to guilt-tripping, following a pattern so predictable it would have been comical if it weren't so painful. Not one message contained an apology. Not one acknowledged that perhaps, just perhaps, they had pushed me too far. I listened to the voicemails next. Mom, crying, saying I'd humiliated them in front of the entire restaurant. Dad, his voice tight with barely controlled rage, telling me I was selfish and immature. Mike, surprisingly calm, saying we needed to talk about my little stunt when I'd come to my senses. The old Emily would have called back immediately, apologizing, explaining, trying to make everyone feel better. The old Emily would have promised to pay them back for the dinner. The old Emily would have been consumed by guilt and shame. But I wasn't that Emily anymore. I put my phone on silent and placed it face down on my nightstand. Then I did something I'd never done before when faced with family drama. I went to bed. Not to cry. Not to replay the evening's events obsessively. Just to sleep, to take care of myself in the most basic way possible. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my curtains and a strange sense of lightness. For a moment, I couldn't place the feeling. Then I remembered I had broken free. The cycle of financial and emotional exploitation that had defined my family relationships for years was, if not ended, at least disrupted. I made coffee and sat by my window, watching the city come alive. People hurried to work, kids trudged to school, delivery trucks double-parked. Normal life continuing all around me while my world had shifted on its axis. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, buzzed with a new message from Mom. We need to talk. Come over for lunch. No, please. No acknowledgement of what had happened. Just an expectation that I would comply, as I always had before. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on, no. I need space. 3 little words that would have been unthinkable just 24 hours earlier. My finger hovered over the send button for several seconds before I finally pressed it. Then I put my phone down and got ready for work. The publishing house where I worked as an assistant editor was housed in a converted factory building in Brooklyn. Normally, I hurried through my morning commute, anxious not to be late, my mind already occupied with manuscripts and deadlines and office politics. Today, I noticed things I usually missed: the quality of the light, the expressions on my fellow subway riders' faces, the energy of the city itself. My boss, Meredith, raised an eyebrow when I walked in. "You look different," she said, studying me over her reading glasses. "I feel different," I admitted. Good different or bad different? I considered the question. Despite the emotional tumult, despite the uncertainty about what came next with my family, despite the fact that I'd have to be even more careful with money now that I was truly on my own, I felt lighter, clearer, more myself. Good different, I said firmly. Meredith nodded approvingly. About time. I dove into work with unusual focus, grateful for the distraction. Manuscripts that normally seemed daunting now felt manageable. Emails that would have stressed me out rolled off me. Even the office drama, who was getting promoted, who was sleeping with whom, who had gotten the best assignments, seemed trivial compared to what I'd just been through. At lunch, I splurged on a sandwich from the good deli instead of eating the sad leftovers I'd brought from home. Sitting in the small park across from our building, enjoying food I'd bought just for myself, I checked my phone again. 5 more messages from Mom, escalating in tone from demanding to pleading. 1 from Dad that was just a terse, "Call your mother." 2 from Jason, surprisingly conciliatory. "Look, we were jerks, okay? But you didn't have to leave us with the bill, and later, Mom's really upset. Just call her." And 1 from Rachel, "I get why you did it. Call me if you want to talk. No pressure." I finished my sandwich, savoring the last bite, then put my phone away without responding to any of them. They'd had years of my immediate attention, my instant compliance. They could wait a little longer while I figured out what I wanted to say, what boundaries I needed to set. The afternoon sunshine felt warm on my face, a stark contrast to the cold rain of the previous night. People moved around me, engaged in their own lives, their own dramas. A young couple on a nearby bench fed each other bites of pastry, laughing. An old man read a newspaper, muttering to himself occasionally. A group of office workers like me, escaping their desks for a precious hour of freedom. Freedom. That's what I felt. Not the absence of family. I wasn't ready to write them off completely, but the absence of their constant gravitational pull. The absence of obligation. The absence of resentment. Just space to breathe, to exist, to decide for myself what came next. I finished my lunch break and walked back to the office, my steps lighter than they had been in years. The cold night had passed. In its place was a warmth I'd forgotten. I could feel the warmth of choosing myself, of setting my own course, of finally being free. 3 days passed with my phone remaining largely unanswered. I'd respond to work emails and texts from the few friends I'd managed to maintain despite my family's constant demands, but any message from a family member went deliberately unread. I wasn't ready yet. Each day of silence felt like rebuilding a piece of myself that had been worn away over years of saying yes when I wanted to say no. On the 4th day, as I was leaving work, my phone rang with Rachel's number. Unlike the others, she'd sent only that one supportive message and then gone quiet. Out of all of them, she seemed to actually respect my need for space. I hesitated, then answered. "Hey," I said, stepping to the side of the busy sidewalk to let others pass. "Emily." Her voice was warm, genuinely pleased. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." "Almost didn't," I admitted. "But you're the only one who hasn't bombarded me with guilt trips, so I figured I owed you at least a conversation." "You don't owe anyone anything," she said quietly. "That's kind of the point, isn't it?" The simple validation in her words nearly brought me to tears right there on Lexington Avenue. "Yeah," I managed to say. "That's exactly the point. Listen, I'm in town for another week. Would you want to get coffee? Just us. I promise it's not a setup." I should have been more suspicious, but Rachel had always been somewhat removed from the worst of the family dynamics. She lived in Chicago, only visiting New York a few times a year, and our interactions had always been relatively pleasant if superficial. "Okay," I agreed. "But somewhere affordable this time." She laughed. "God, yes. How about that place near your office with the mismatched mugs?" My treat. We met the next day at Brouhaha, a cramped but cozy coffee shop where none of the chairs matched and the baristas knew most customers by name. Rachel was already there when I arrived, 2 steaming mugs on the table in front of her. "I remembered you like chai," she said, pushing one toward me. I sat down, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "Thanks." For a moment, we just sipped our drinks in silence. Rachel looked good, put together in that effortless way I'd always envied, her blonde bob gleaming, her casual outfit probably costing more than my rent. But there was something different about her too, a slight uncertainty in her usually confident demeanor. "So," she finally said. That was quite an exit. I'd expected recrimination, but her tone held only mild amusement. "Not my proudest moment," I admitted. "Are you kidding?" It was legend-worthy. Jason's face when the waiter came back and said you'd left? Priceless. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. "I bet. Aunt Linda, your mom, she tried to play it off at first." "Oh, she probably just stepped outside for a call." But after 10 minutes, we all knew. Rachel shook her head, remembering. "Uncle Bob was furious. Kept saying you'd embarrassed him in front of everyone." The mention of my parents brought back the hurt. What about the fact that they were embarrassing me? Using me? Making jokes at my expense? Rachel had the grace to look ashamed. "That toast was awful." "I shouldn't have said that, not even as a joke." "I'm sorry." "But you meant it," I said, not as an accusation but as a simple fact. "That's how you all see me. The wallet. The responsible one. The one who'll always pick up the check." She didn't deny it. I think we all got used to you saying yes. It became expected. And when something's expected, People stop being grateful for it. I nodded, surprised by her insight. That's exactly it. For what it's worth, not all of us are handling this the same way, Rachel continued, stirring her coffee absently. Your mom is oscillating between being furious and being devastated. She cries, then she rages about how ungrateful you are, then she cries again. Your dad's just angry. Refuses to even discuss it except to say you need to apologize. Of course, I muttered. Because heaven forbid he acknowledges that he might have done something wrong. Mike's mostly worried about money. He was counting on you to help with Tommy's baseball camp tuition next month. I hadn't even known about that expected expense. Another withdrawal from the bank of Emily that I'd never agreed to. And Jason? Rachel hesitated. Jason's complicated. I think he actually feels guilty, but he's not good at admitting it. He keeps defending you to your parents, which is new. That was surprising. Jason and I had never been especially close, and his comment about me not having real expenses because I didn't have children had particularly stung. What about you? I asked. Where do you stand in all this? Rachel set down her mug, meeting my eyes directly. I think you did exactly what you needed to do. What any of us would have done if we'd had the courage. And I think they deserved it. I blinked, taken aback by her candor. Then why, at the restaurant? Why did you go along with it? She looked away, her confidence faltering. Because it's easier, isn't it? To go along. To not make waves. To be part of the group, even when the group is wrong. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. I've always envied you, you know. Me? I couldn't hide my disbelief. Rachel had always seemed so put together, so confident, so much more successful than me. You built your own life. Your own career. You're independent in a way I've never been. She laughed, but it held no humor. My fancy apartment? My dad pays the rent. My job at that gallery? My uncle owns it. Even this trip was paid for by my parents. They wanted me to check on family while I was here. I'd had no idea. Rachel had always projected such self-sufficiency, such ease. Finding out it was largely an illusion made me see her in an entirely new light. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. That can't be easy. Not as hard as being everyone's ATM, she countered with a small smile. But not great either. We fell into a more comfortable conversation after that, talking about her gallery work, my publishing job, the novels I hope to edit someday. It was possibly the first real conversation we'd ever had cousin to cousin, woman to woman, rather than family member to family wallet. As we were finishing our coffees, Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression tightening. It's your mom. My stomach clenched. What does she want? Rachel showed me the text. Is she with you? Make her call me now. She knows we're meeting? I asked, tension creeping back into my shoulders. I might have mentioned it, Rachel admitted, looking guilty. But I swear I didn't tell her where or when. And I'm not going to. I believed her, but the knowledge that my mother was actively trying to track me down made me uneasy. I hadn't been hiding. I'd still been going to work, still living in my apartment, but I'd been deliberately unreachable to them. You should probably know, Rachel said carefully, they're planning an intervention. A what? A family meeting. This Sunday at your parents' house. Everyone will be there. They're going to try to make you see reason. She made air quotes around the last word. I laughed incredulously. Are they serious? An intervention? Like I'm an addict who needs to be saved from myself? They're worried about losing their safety net, Rachel said bluntly. And they're not used to you saying no. Are you going to be there? I asked, suddenly anxious about facing them all alone. Rachel hesitated. I'm supposed to be, but I won't if you don't want me to. I considered this. Having someone who understood my perspective, who might even be on my side, could make it less overwhelming. But it also put Rachel in an awkward position with the rest of the family. Thank you for the warning, I said finally. But I won't be attending their intervention. I'm not ready to face them yet, especially not all at once. Relief flashed across Rachel's face. I don't blame you. It would be a firing squad. After we parted ways, I walked home slowly, mulling over our conversation. It was strange to have an ally in the family, especially one I'd never been particularly close to before. But Rachel's insights had confirmed what I already suspected. My family wasn't soul-searching about how they'd treated me. They were panicking about how to get me back in line. That evening, I finally turned on my phone's ringer and listened to the accumulated voicemails. My mother, alternating between tearful pleas and sharp accusations. My father, his voice gruff with suppressed anger, demanding I stop this nonsense. Mike, awkwardly explaining about Tommy's baseball camp, how they were counting on me to help. Jason, surprisingly, sounding almost conciliatory. Look, we need to talk. Not like before. Really talk. The last message was from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Lewis, this is Timothy Watson from First National Bank. I'm calling regarding the recent attempt to add you as a guarantor on a loan application submitted by Robert Lewis. Please call us back at your earliest convenience to discuss this matter. My hands shook as I replayed the message. My father had tried to add me as a guarantor on a loan without my knowledge or consent. Even now, even after everything, he was still trying to use me financially. That was the moment I made my decision. I sat down at my small kitchen table, opened my laptop, and composed a single email addressed to my parents, both brothers and Rachel. I've heard you're planning a family meeting this Sunday to discuss my recent behavior. I won't be attending. I need you to understand that I'm not your wallet. Not anymore. I've spent years helping all of you financially, paying for emergencies, covering bills, providing loans that were never repaid. I did it because I love you, but it's become clear that this relationship is one-sided. Until we can establish boundaries that include mutual respect and consideration, I need space. Please don't contact me. When I'm ready to talk, it will be on my terms, not at an intervention designed to make me feel guilty for finally standing up for myself. Dad, the bank called me. Don't ever try to use my name or credit again without my explicit permission. I love you all, but I love myself too. And it's time I started acting like it. Emily, I read it over once, twice, 3 times before hitting send. Then I blocked their numbers, temporarily, just for a week or 2, to give myself space to breathe without constant interruptions. It felt like severing a limb. Painful, drastic, possibly irreversible, but also necessary for survival. I'd spent so long being what they needed that I'd forgotten how to be what I needed. That had to change, even if it meant walking away from the people I'd spent my entire life trying to please. The silence that followed was deafening. But in that silence, for the first time in years, I could hear myself think. 6 months passed in a blur of normalcy that felt anything but normal to me. 6 months of grocery shopping without calculating how much I could spend if Mike needed help with his rent. 6 months of saying yes to after-work drinks without worrying about saving every penny for the next family emergency. 6 months of not answering calls that came with strings attached. I'd unblocked their numbers after 2 weeks, but I maintained my distance. My mother's texts became less frequent, shifting from angry demands to awkward attempts at normal conversation. My father stopped contacting me altogether. Mike would occasionally send photos of his kids with no caption, a wordless reminder of what I was missing. Jason, surprisingly, respected my boundaries the most, sending only a brief, "Hope you're doing well," message every few weeks. Rachel kept in touch regularly, becoming an unexpected friend. She'd moved back to Chicago, but called often, updating me on family gossip without pressure, listening when I needed to vent. Through her, I knew my absence was felt. Holiday dinners were quieter, family gatherings smaller. But no one had yet acknowledged the underlying issues that had driven me away. The strangest part wasn't the distance from my family, though. It was discovering who I was without them. I'd defined myself for so long as the responsible one, the caretaker, the problem solver, that I hardly knew how to exist outside those roles. So I began experimenting. I joined a book club through the publishing house, spending Wednesday evenings discussing novels with fellow editors and writers. I took a weekend pottery class, discovering I had absolutely no talent for it, but enjoying the messy process anyway. I started dating casually, nothing serious, just coffee or dinner with interesting people who knew nothing about my family drama. Most significantly, I began saving money. Without the constant drain of family loans, my modest salary stretched further than I'd ever imagined possible. For the first time in my adult life, I had an emergency fund. I could look at my bank account without anxiety. I even started contributing to a retirement account, a concept that had seemed laughably distant before. One unseasonably warm April evening, I was walking home from the subway when my phone rang with my mother's number. I hesitated, finger hovering over the screen. We hadn't spoken directly since that night at Gardenia, though she'd left numerous voicemails and texts. Something made me answer. Hello? Emily. Her voice was tentative, almost fragile. Not the commanding tone I was used to. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I almost didn't, I admitted, slowing my pace. What do you need, Mom? The question came out harsher than I'd intended, but years of conditioning were hard to break. Every call from her had always been a prelude to a request. I don't need anything, she said, sounding hurt. I just wanted to hear your voice. I stopped walking entirely, leaning against a storefront. This was new territory. Oh! An awkward silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, could picture her sitting in the living room of the house I grew up in, probably clutching her favorite throw pillow the way she did when she was nervous. Your father had a health scare, she finally said. Nothing serious, elevated blood pressure. Doctor says he needs to watch his diet, exercise more. My heart clenched despite everything. Is he okay? Yes. Just a warning sign. But it got me thinking. She paused, and I could hear the emotion in her voice. Life is short, Emily. Too short for this. Whatever this is between us. I'd imagined this conversation countless times over the past months. In my daydreams, I'd been righteously angry or coldly dismissive. But faced with the reality of my mother's tentative olive branch, I felt only tired. What do you want from me, Mom? I want my daughter back, she said simply. I miss you. The daughter who pays for everything? Who never says no? Who puts everyone else first? The bitterness I thought I'd moved past seeped into my voice. Because that person doesn't exist anymore. I know. Her voice was quiet. I know we took advantage. I know we hurt you. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement, let alone an apology, that I'd ever heard from her. I didn't know how to respond. Your brother Jason said something that made me think, she continued when I didn't speak. He said we treated you like an ATM, not a daughter. That we never saw you, just what you could do for us. Jason, my surprising advocate. The one who joked about me being the family wallet, but who apparently had been doing some soul-searching of his own. He's right, I said finally. That's exactly how it felt. Another long silence. Then, could we have coffee sometime? Just us. No agenda. No asking for anything. Just coffee. I thought about saying no. About maintaining the distance that had allowed me to grow and change. But I also thought about what Khalid, my Lyft driver on that rainy night, had said about his brother. Sometimes people could change when given the chance. Coffee, I agreed cautiously. But at Brouhaha, not somewhere expensive. And just us. Brouhaha, she repeated, as if memorizing the name. Thank you, Emily. After we hung up, I continued my walk home, my emotions a tangle I couldn't quite unravel. Hope. Skepticism. The old desire to please warring with my hard-won boundaries. I didn't know if a single coffee could begin to repair the damage of years of exploitation. I didn't know if I even wanted to try. But I was curious. Curious to see my mother as a person, not just a figure of authority or obligation. Curious to discover if there could be something different between us now that I'd found my voice. We met the following Saturday. Mom looked older than I remembered, more fragile somehow. She dressed simply, jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. None of the flashy jewelry or designer labels she usually favored. It was as if she was making a deliberate effort to meet me on my terms. The conversation was stilted at first, circling around safe topics, the weather, a cousin's new baby, a TV show we both watched. But eventually, haltingly, we began to talk about what had happened. I never meant to. She started, then stopped, recalibrating. No, that's not right. I did mean to rely on you. I did take advantage. We all did. It was easier than facing our own problems. I nodded, surprised and relieved by her directness. Your father still doesn't see it, she continued. He thinks you're just being difficult. That you'll come around eventually. I won't, I said firmly. Not to how things were. I know. She wrapped her hands around her mug, looking down. I don't want that either. I want to know you, Emily. The real you. Not the checkbook. It wasn't a perfect conversation. Old patterns asserted themselves occasionally. She slipped once and mentioned a bill she was struggling with, then caught herself with a rueful smile. Sorry. Force of habit. But it was a start. A tentative step towards something different, something potentially healthier. We agreed to meet again the following week. The rest of my family took longer. Dad sent a terse email a month later, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement that things got out of hand, and a suggestion that we move forward. I responded with clear boundaries about money and expectations. He accepted them with minimal argument, which felt like progress. Mike remained the most resistant, still occasionally sending texts that hinted at financial needs. When I didn't respond to those, he eventually shifted to more genuine connections, asking about my life or sharing genuine updates about his kids without an ulterior motive. Jason surprised me the most. He invited me to lunch one day, insisted on paying, and offered a straightforward apology. I was an ass, he said bluntly. I treated you like a resource, not a sister. I'm sorry. By the time autumn rolled around again, almost a year since that fateful dinner at Gardenia, my relationship with my family had transformed. Not perfect, not always easy, but fundamentally different. We gathered for my birthday at a reasonably priced Italian restaurant, their suggestion, not mine. Everyone paid for their own meals without comment. Dad raised a toast to me that contained not a single joke about money. It felt like a victory, but not the most important one. The real victory was inside me. I'd discovered my worth beyond what I could provide for others. I'd learned to say no without guilt, yes with joy. I'd built a life that was about my own dreams and needs, not just everyone else's emergencies. One evening in late September, I found myself walking past an upscale restaurant, not Gardenia, but similar in its elegant facade and obviously expensive menu. Through the window, I could see a family seated at a large round table, laughing together. An older couple, probably the parents, a few adult children, perhaps a cousin or two. They looked happy, connected, genuinely enjoying each other's company. A pang of something, not quite envy, not quite loss, moved through me. My family gatherings would probably never look quite that effortless. We had too much history, too many bad patterns to overcome completely. But we were trying. All of us, in our own ways, were trying to build something healthier from the wreckage of what had come before. I continued walking, feeling the pleasant weight of my laptop bag on my shoulder. Inside was the first draft of a novel I'd been quietly working on for months, the story of a woman finding her voice, her boundaries, herself. My editor at the publishing house had already expressed interest in reading it when it was ready. My phone buzzed with a text from a man I'd been seeing for the past few weeks. Dinner tomorrow? I've been thinking about you all day. I smiled, typing back, looking forward to it. Another buzz, this one from Rachel, sending a funny meme about publishing with the message, thought of you when I saw this. Coffee next time I'm in town? My life now was full in a way it had never been when I was consumed with solving everyone else's problems. Full of possibilities, of connections that gave as much as they took, of dreams that belonged entirely to me. A year ago, walking away from that restaurant table had felt like the end of something. I'd been terrified, heartbroken, adrift. I couldn't have known it was actually a beginning, the first step toward a life that was truly mine, not one that existed only in service to others. As I reached my apartment building, I paused to look up at the night sky. Living in the city, you couldn't see many stars through the light pollution. But occasionally, on clear nights like this, a few managed to shine through, distant, brilliant points of light cutting through the darkness. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cool autumn air, feeling the solid ground beneath my feet. Then I went inside, ready to write another chapter of my own story, one where I was the author, not just a character in someone else's plot. One where I moved through the world not as a wallet, but as a woman who had finally said, enough, and discovered that on the other side of that word was an entire life waiting to be lived.